Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I've got a story today that's going to pull you in and not let go. Think storms, secrets, and a twist that'll knock your socks off. So grab your coffee, hit that like button, and let's get into it. Oh, and drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where you're tuning in from. Picture this, Seattle, all gray skies and dripping rain, where Lena Harper's been pouring coffee for years. She's 28, a barista at Haven Brew, this little hole-in-the-wall cafe with creaky wooden tables and the warm smell of roasted beans hanging in the air. It's not fancy, but it's home. Lena shares a tiny apartment with her sister Mia, who's 20 and knee-deep in design school. The two of them have been a team ever since their mom passed away from cancer 10 years back. That hit Lena hard. She still remembers her mom's hands guiding hers over a mixing bowl, showing her how to roll dough just right. It's why she dreams of opening her own bakery someday, a little place to keep her mom's memory alive. Life's not easy for Lena, though. She's juggling rent, Mia's tuition, and those long shifts at Haven Brew. But she's good at it, knows the regulars like family. There's the old guy who grumbles for black coffee, the mom who begs for extra foam to survive her day. It's a grind, but it keeps her steady. At least it did, until one wild night turned everything she knew upside down. It was late, way past closing, and a storm was tearing through Seattle. Rain slammed against the cafe windows like it was trying to break in, and the wind whipped the streets into a mess. Lena was wiping down the counter, ready to call it a night, when she heard it. A sharp screech of tires, then a gut-wrenching crash. Her heart jumped into her throat. She peeked out the door, squinting through the fogged-up glass, and saw it. A black SUV down the street, smashed into a tree, its headlights flickering weakly in the downpour. She didn't think twice, just grabbed her jacket and ran out into the chaos. The rain hit her like a wall, soaking her through in seconds, her dark hair sticking to her face as she bolted toward the wreck. Up close, it was bad. The front of the SUV was a twisted mess, steam hissing out like a wounded animal. Inside, a woman was slumped over the steering wheel, her fancy coat streaked with mud, a thin line of blood running from her forehead. Lena's hands were shaking as she yanked the door open, her mom's old first aid tricks flooding back. "Hey, can you hear me?" she called, her voice nearly lost in the storm as she pressed her fingers to the woman's neck. There, a faint pulse. She scrambled for her phone, dialed 999 and yelled, "Crash on Pine Street, near Haven Brew. Hurry, she's hurt." While waiting, Lena grabbed her scarf and pressed it to the woman's head, trying to stop the bleeding. "Hang on, you're gonna be okay," she whispered, more to herself than anything. Soon, sirens cut through the rain and paramedics took over, pulling the woman onto a stretcher. Lena stepped back, drenched and shivering, watching them disappear into the night. She didn't know who this stranger was, didn't even get a good look at her face, but as she stood there, something told her this wasn't just a random moment, and she was right, because fate had a hell of a surprise waiting for her. Stick around, you won't believe what's coming next. So there Lena was, still rattled from that stormy night, dragging herself back to Haven Brew the next morning. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air still felt heavy, like it was holding on to some kind of secret. She unlocked the cafe door, flipped on the lights, and started the usual routine, grinding beans, firing up the espresso machine, trying to shake off the image of that wrecked SUV. She figured it was a one-off, a crazy story to tell Mia over dinner. But life? It had other plans. Around mid-morning, the bell above the door jingled, and in walked this woman, tall, sharp, like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She was maybe 35, dressed in a sleek gray coat that screamed money, a small bandage peeking out from under her dark bangs. Lena glanced up from steaming milk, and something clicked. That coat, that posture, it was her, the woman from the crash. Before Lena could process it, the stranger strode right up to the counter, her blue eyes locking onto Lena's with this quiet intensity. "Morning," she said, voice smooth but firm. "I'm Vivian Marshall. I assume you're one of the staff here?" Lena blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, I'm Lena, barista. You're okay? After last night?" Vivian's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks to you, yes, I owe you one. But I'm not here for coffee." She paused, scanning the room like she was sizing it up. "I'm the new owner of Haven Brew. Just closed the deal last week." The words hit Lena like a punch. Owner? This woman she'd pulled from a wreck was now her boss? She fumbled with the milk pitcher, nearly dropping it. "Wait, what? You bought this place?" Vivian nodded, pulling a folder from her bag and flipping it open on the counter. "I did, and I've got plans. This cafe's got potential, but it's stuck in the past. I'm turning it into something bigger, a modern chain, upscale vibe, the works." Lena's stomach twisted. Haven Brew wasn't just a job to her. It was a piece of her mom, a scrappy little spot where people felt like they belonged. She pictured her mom's old recipes scribbled in the back, the chipped mugs regulars loved. "But this place works," she said, voice tighter than she meant it to be. "People come here because it's not some shiny chain." Vivian raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "People also like quality, efficiency. I'm not here to play small. We're rebranding, new menu, new look, starting next month." Lena wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat as Vivian handed her a stack of papers, plans for sleek furniture, a fancy logo, stuff that'd wipe away everything she cared about. Before she could snap back, the door swung open again and in came Charlie, the cafe's 40-year-old cook, all broad shoulders and flour-dusted apron. "Morning, Lena." "Who's this?" he asked, eyeing Vivian. "New owner," Lena muttered, still reeling. Charlie's face fell, and Vivian didn't miss a beat. "Good to meet you. I'll need your input on streamlining the kitchen. We're cutting costs, upping output." Charlie crossed his arms, grumbling. "Streamlining? I've been cooking here 10 years. Works fine as is." Vivian just smiled, that cool, detached kind of smile that said she wasn't budging. Then Elise, the 50-year-old manager with gray streaks in her hair and a no-nonsense vibe, walked in from the back. She caught the tension right away. "What's going on?" she asked, peering over her glasses. Lena handed her the papers. "Meet Vivian Marshall. She owns us now, wants to gut the place." Elise skimmed the plans, her frown deepening. "This is a community spot, not a corporate playground. You'll lose half our crowd." Vivian didn't flinch. "Or gain a bigger one. I've done this before. Trust me, it'll pay off." But Lena didn't trust her, not one bit. This wasn't just about coffee. It was personal. She thought of Mia, how she'd poured her heart into keeping them afloat, how Haven Brew was the last tether to her mom's memory. "You don't get it," she said, voice low. "This isn't some project you can flip. It's ours." Vivian closed her folder, tilting her head. "It's mine now, Lena, and I don't fail at what I do. You're welcome to help or step aside." The air crackled between them, a standoff neither wanted to lose. Charlie muttered something about fancy suits ruining everything, while Elise shot Lena a look that said, "We're in trouble." Lena clenched her fists, her mind racing. She'd saved this woman's life last night, and now Vivian was here, tearing hers apart. It didn't add up, didn't feel fair. That night, back at the apartment, Lena slumped on the couch, staring at the ceiling while Mia sketched at the kitchen table. "New boss is a nightmare," Lena said, rubbing her temples. "Wants to turn Haven Brew into some soulless chain." Mia looked up, pencil pausing. "The lady from the crash? That's insane. What are you gonna do?" Lena sighed. "Fight, I guess. I can't let her erase Mom's mark on that place." Mia nodded, fierce. "Then don't. You're tougher than she thinks." Lena wasn't so sure. Vivian wasn't just some pushy customer. She was a CEO, sharp and relentless. But as she lay awake later, rain tapping the window, Lena felt a spark ignite. She'd saved Vivian once, sure, but now she had to save Haven Brew, and maybe herself too. She didn't know it yet, but this was just the start of a battle that had unearthed secrets bigger than she could imagine. What do you think? Would you stand up to a boss like that? Let me know below, because things are about to get wild. Lena woke up the next morning with a knot in her stomach, the kind that sticks around after a bad dream you can't quite shake. She'd spent half the night replaying Vivian's words. New menu, new look, starting next month. And the other half wondering how she'd fight back. Having Brew wasn't just a paycheck. It was her anchor, a piece of her mom she could still touch. She wasn't about to let some slick CEO rip it apart. So when she got to the cafe, she marched straight up to Vivian, who was already there, tapping away on a laptop at a corner table, looking like she owned the world, which, technically, she now did. "Look," Lena said, planting her hands on her hips, "if you're dead set on changing this place, at least give me a shot to show you what it's worth first. Not your fancy chain idea. Our way." Vivian glanced up, one eyebrow arched like she was sizing Lena up. "Your way?" she asked, leaning back. "Fine, impress me. You've got 2 weeks to prove this nostalgia act can turn a profit. I'm putting you in charge, temporarily. Don't mess it up." Lena's jaw tightened. It wasn't a victory, but it was a chance. She nodded, already brainstorming as Vivian went back to her screen. That's when the idea hit her. A fundraising event. Not just any fundraiser, but one for orphaned kids. Something close to her heart because her mom had grown up in foster care, piecing together a life from scraps. If Haven Brew could pull this off, it'd show Vivian the cafe was more than a balance sheet. It was a heartbeat for the neighborhood. She pitched it to the crew later that day, gathered around the counter after the lunch rush. Charlie scratched his beard, skeptical. A fundraiser? We're barely keeping the lights on. Elise adjusted her glasses, nodding slowly. Could work, though. People love a cause. Might bring in new faces. Lena grinned, feeling a flicker of hope. Exactly. We do it right. Good food, good vibes, and we prove we don't need a corporate makeover to matter. Charlie shrugged, coming around. All right, I'll whip up some free pastries, but if this flops, I'm blaming you. Elise offered to rope in the regulars, and Mia, who'd popped by after class, jumped in too. I'll design flyers, she said, sketching a quick coffee cup with a heart on her notepad. Make it pop. Lena felt a surge of gratitude. These people weren't just coworkers. They were her fight squad. The next week was a blur. Lena threw everything into it, running on coffee and grit. She and Charlie spent late nights testing recipes, mini scones with a honey glaze, her mom's old trick, and a savory quiche that had customers sniffing the air. Mia plastered flyers around town, her bold designs catching eyes at bus stops and corner stores. Elise worked the phone, charming every regular into showing up. Even Vivian stuck around, watching from the sidelines, her arms crossed, not saying much but taking notes. Lena caught her tasting a scone once, her face softening for a split second before the CEO mask snapped back on. Not bad, Vivian muttered, and Lena took it as a win. The day of the event rolled in fast, a crisp Saturday with a sky clear enough to promise a crowd. Haven Brew buzzed from the moment they flipped the sign to open. Neighbors trickled in, curious about the Brew for a Cause posters. Regulars brought friends, and soon the place was packed. Kids running around, folks sipping lattes, dropping bills into a donation jar Mia had painted with stars. Charlie slung pastries like a pro, grinning as people raved about the quiche. Elise manned the register, chatting up everyone who walked through the door. Lena darted between tables, refilling cups, her heart pounding with nervous energy. Then, halfway through, a local reporter showed up, a guy with a scruffy beard and a camera slung over his shoulder. Heard you're raising money for orphans, he said, scribbling in a notebook. Mind if I get a quote? Lena froze, then found her voice. This place isn't just coffee, it's community. We're keeping it alive one cup at a time. He nodded, snapping photos, and Lena prayed this'd make the evening news. By afternoon, the donation jar was overflowing, and Mia tallied up a quick count over $800, plus a 12% sales bump from the day before. Lena couldn't stop smiling, even as her feet ached. Vivian pulled her aside near the end as the crowd thinned out. "Not a bad turnout," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "Numbers look solid so far." Lena wiped her hands on her apron, catching her breath. "Told you, this is what Haven Brew does best. People show up when it means something." Vivian didn't argue, just gave a small nod. "Maybe, but my investors want more than a feel-good story. They want consistency, big returns. You've got a week to show this wasn't a fluke." Lena's smile faded. A week? She'd barely slept in days, and now the clock was ticking again. That night, back at the apartment, Lena flopped onto the couch, exhaustion hitting hard. Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, counting tips they'd split with the crew. "You killed it today," she said, looking up. Even the Ice Queen seemed impressed. Lena laughed, but it was shaky. "Yeah, but it's not enough. Vivian's still got her fancy plans, and the investors are breathing down her neck. I don't know if I can keep this up." Mia scooted closer, her voice fierce. "You can. You're not doing this alone. We've got your back." Lena stared at the ceiling, replaying the day. The laughter, the clink of coins, the way Vivian's face had softened for that one fleeting moment. She felt a shift, subtle but real. Vivian wasn't budging yet, but she was listening. And Lena? She was finding her footing, stepping into a role she hadn't signed up for but couldn't walk away from. The fundraiser had bought her time, maybe even a sliver of Vivian's respect, but as she drifted off, a nagging thought lingered. There was something about Vivian she couldn't place, something familiar in those cold blue eyes. She brushed it off as fatigue, not knowing the truth was closer than she'd ever imagined. This was just the warm-up, folks. Lena thought she was fighting for a café, but she was about to stumble into a secret that'd turn her world inside out. What would you do if your boss pushed you this hard? Drop your thoughts below. I'm dying to hear. The days after the fundraiser felt like a tightrope walk for Lena. Haven Brew was still buzzing, regulars kept talking about the event, sales held steady, and that news clip aired on the local station, giving them a little glow of fame. But Vivian's deadline loomed like a storm cloud. 1 week to prove the cafe could keep the momentum, or she'd greenlight her upscale overhaul. Lena threw herself into it, tweaking the menu with Charlie, brainstorming weekend specials with Elise, leaning on Mia for social media hype. She barely slept, running on fumes and determination. But every time Vivian dropped by, those sharp blue eyes watched her like a hawk, waiting for a slip-up. It all came to a head one rainy afternoon, a few days before the deadline. The cafe was quiet, just a handful of customers nursing their drinks. Vivian showed up unannounced, her coat dripping as she shook off an umbrella. She slid into a booth, motioning Lena over with a flick of her hand. "Numbers are decent," she said, flipping through a tablet. "Not spectacular, but decent. Investors are still antsy, say it's not enough to scale up." Lena bristled, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's not about scaling up overnight. It's about building something real. You saw the fundraiser. People care about this place." Vivian's jaw tightened and she leaned forward, voice low. "Caring doesn't pay bills, Lena. I've sunk money into this. My reputation's on the line. I can't afford to lose because you're clinging to some cozy fantasy." That stung, deeper than Lena expected. She snapped back. "It's not a fantasy. It's my life. My mom's life. You wouldn't get it. You don't even know what it's like to fight for something personal." Vivian's eyes flashed, and for a second she looked almost hurt. "You think I don't?" she said, her tone sharp. "I've fought plenty, left everything behind to get here. Family, home, all of it. Don't assume you know me." The words hung there, heavy and raw. Lena frowned, thrown off. Left everything? What's that supposed to mean? Vivian hesitated, like she'd said too much, then waved it off. Forget it. Point is, I need results, not sentiment. Step up or I'm moving forward my way. She stood to leave, but Lena grabbed her arm, frustration boiling over. No, you don't get to drop that and walk away. What family? What home? You act like you're above all this, but you're hiding something, aren't you? Vivian froze, her face paling. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She pulled her arm free, muttering, "You're out of line," and stormed out into the rain. Lena stood there, chest heaving, replaying the exchange. Something about Vivian's words left everything behind, gnawed at her, tugging at a memory she couldn't place. That night, she couldn't sleep. She dug through an old box in her closet, one she hadn't touched in years, her mom's stuff. Keepsakes she'd clung to after the cancer took her. Photos, recipes, a faded scarf. Then she found it, a crinkled letter tucked inside a cookbook, written in her mom's shaky handwriting. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "To my Lena," it started, "if you ever read this, know I loved you more than anything. Your father left us, but there was someone else too. A woman I trusted who walked away when you were 2. She broke my heart, but I forgave her. Her name was Vivian." Lena's breath caught. Vivian? It couldn't be. She scanned the letter again, piecing it together. Dates, vague mentions of a career-driven friend who'd abandoned them. Her mind raced back to Vivian's face, those blue eyes she'd always felt oddly familiar. No, it was impossible. But was it? The next morning, Lena stormed into Haven Brew before opening, catching Vivian alone at the counter with a coffee. "We need to talk," she said, voice shaking as she slapped the letter down. "Read this. Tell me it's not you." Vivian's brow furrowed as she picked it up, scanning the lines. Her hands started to tremble and her face went white. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Lena stepped closer, tears prickling her eyes. "From my mom. She wrote it before she died. Said someone named Vivian left me. Is it you? Are you her?" Vivian sank onto a stool, the letter slipping from her fingers. For a long moment she didn't speak, just stared at the floor. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely carried, she said, "Yes, I am." Lena's world tilted. She gripped the counter, fighting a wave of nausea. "You're my mom? You left me? Left us? And now you waltz in here like it's nothing?" Vivian looked up, eyes wet. "It wasn't nothing. I was young, broke, chasing a career. I thought you'd be better off without me dragging you down. I didn't know she'd get sick. I didn't know any of it." Lena laughed, bitter and broken. "Better off? I grew up thinking you didn't want me, and now you're here trying to take this place too?" Vivian shook her head, voice cracking. "I didn't know it was you, not at first. I bought Haven Brew on a whim, then saw your name on the roster. I stayed because I wanted to fix something. Anything." Lena turned away, tears spilling now. "You don't get to fix this, not like that." The air between them was thick, electric with pain. Lena wanted to scream, to run, but her feet wouldn't move. Vivian stood, reaching out, then stopped herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't undo it, but I'm here now." Lena didn't answer, just grabbed the letter and walked out, leaving Vivian alone in the empty cafe. Her whole life felt like a lie, unraveling in seconds. The woman she'd saved, the boss she'd fought, was her mother, the one who'd abandoned her. How do you even process that? This twist hit Lena like a freight train, and it's not over yet. She's got a choice coming. Face this ghost from her past, or let it bury her. What would you do if your world flipped like that? Tell me in the comments. I need to hear your thoughts, because this is about to get even crazier. Lena didn't go back to Haven Brew that day. She couldn't. Her head was a mess, spinning with Vivian's confession, Her mother, the woman who'd walked out when she was 2, now sitting in her cafe like some ghost come to life. She wandered Seattle's rainy streets for hours, clutching that crumpled letter until her shoes were soaked and her tears had dried into a dull ache. She ended up at the apartment, collapsing onto the couch where Mia found her later, staring blankly at the wall. "Lena, what's wrong?" Mia asked, dropping her sketchbook. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," Lena muttered, voice hoarse. She handed Mia the letter, watching her sister's eyes widen as she read. "Vivian's my mom. She left us, left me, and now she's here acting like she can fix it." Mia sank down beside her, stunned. "Holy crap. That's insane. What are you gonna do?" Lena shook her head. "I don't know. Hate her? Forgive her? I can't even think straight." Mia grabbed her hand, fierce as ever. "You don't have to figure it out alone. But that cafe, it's still yours. Don't let her take that too." Those words stuck with Lena through a sleepless night. By morning, she knew she had to face Vivian, not just for herself, but for Haven Brew. She walked into the cafe early, finding Vivian already there, looking as wrecked as Lena felt, dark circles under her eyes, coffee untouched. They stared at each other, the silence thick enough to choke on, until Lena finally spoke. "Why'd you come back? Why now?" Vivian's voice was soft, shaky. "I didn't plan it. I saw your name on the staff list after I bought the place. Thought maybe I could watch from afar, help somehow. Then you saved me that night and I couldn't stay away." Lena's chest tightened. "You don't get to play savior after 26 years. I grew up thinking I wasn't enough." Vivian flinched, tears welling up. "You were enough. I wasn't. I was scared, broke, chasing some dream of success. I thought I'd come back when I had something to offer, but then your mom got sick and I lost my chance." Lena wanted to stay angry, but the crack in Vivian's voice hit her hard. She saw a woman who'd run from her mistakes, not a monster. "I needed you," Lena whispered. "Not money." "I know," Vivian said, wiping her eyes. "I can't fix the past, but I'm here now, if you'll let me." It wasn't an apology that erased the hurt, but it was a start. Lena took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Okay, but we do this my way. For the cafe, for us." Vivian managed a small, grateful smile. "Deal." That fragile truce carried them into the real fight, the investor meeting. Vivian's deadline was up and her partners were circling, ready to gut Haven Brew if it didn't measure up. They met in a sleek downtown office, all glass and steel, a world away from the cafe's cozy chaos. Lena stood beside Vivian, clutching a folder of sales data and event photos, facing a table of suits led by a gruff guy named Marcus. "Show me why we shouldn't rebrand this place top to bottom," he barked, tapping his pen. Lena didn't flinch. "Because it's working," she said, sliding the folder across. "Sales are up 12% since the fundraiser. We've got local buzz, loyal customers, a community that shows up. You don't need a fancy chain. People want real." Marcus skimmed the numbers, unimpressed. "Cute story, but it's small potatoes. We need growth, not charity stunts." Vivian stepped in, voice steady. "It's not a stunt. Lena's built something sustainable, profit with a pulse. A full rebrand risks losing that base. Give us 6 months to scale it." Another investor, a woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "You're betting a lot on her, Vivian. Why?" Vivian glanced at Lena, a flicker of pride breaking through. "Because she's proven it. She saved my life, then saved this cafe. I trust her." Lena's throat tightened. Those words meant more than she'd expected. Marcus grunted, flipping through the data again. "Fine, 6 months. Show me real numbers or we're done playing nice." It wasn't a cheer-worthy win, but it was time Lena could work with. As they left the room, Vivian squeezed Lena's shoulder. "You did good." Lena nodded, a tired smile tugging at her lips. We did. For the first time, it felt like they were on the same side, not just boss and barista, but something messier, something closer. The fight wasn't over, but they'd carved out a chance to figure it out together. What a ride, right? Stick around. This story's got one last punch to throw. After that investor meeting, Lena felt like she could finally breathe. Well, sort of. 6 months wasn't forever, but it was a lifeline, a shot to keep Haven Brew alive on her terms. She and Vivian walked out of that cold office tower together, the Seattle drizzle greeting them like an old friend. Vivian broke the silence first, her voice softer than usual. "You're tougher than I ever was, you know that?" Lena glanced at her, half smiling. "Guess I had to be." It wasn't a warm, fuzzy moment, but it was real. A thread tying them together after all those years apart. Back at Haven Brew, things shifted fast. Vivian didn't just sit on the sidelines anymore. She rolled up her sleeves, helping Lena tweak the numbers, plan small upgrades. One day, over a stack of receipts, she slid an envelope across the counter. "Open it," she said, eyes glinting. Inside was a contract, partial ownership of the café, Lena's name right next to Vivian's. "You've earned this," Vivian told her. "Not just for saving me, but for saving this place." Lena's hands shook as she held it, her mom's dream flashing in her mind. A bakery of her own, now closer than ever. "I'm in," she said, voice steady. "Let's make it work." Weeks later, Haven Brew was thriving. They kept the cozy vibe, worn tables, warm lights, but added a few modern touches, a chalkboard with daily specials, a corner for Mia's art prints. Sales climbed, slow but sure, and the community stuck around, drawn by the cafe's heart. One quiet afternoon, Lena caught Vivian smiling at a kid scribbling on a napkin, and for a split second she saw her mom in those blue eyes. Not the one who left, but the one who'd come back. Mia noticed too, nudging her later. "We're a weird little family now, huh?" Lena laughed. "Yeah, we are." Standing behind the counter, pouring a latte, Lena felt it her mom hadn't really left her. She was in the recipes, the cafe, even in Vivian's messy redemption. A new future was brewing, one cup at a time. Love this story? Hit subscribe. I've got more coming. What'd you think? Drop it below.